Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Zeros TV. Today, I'm joined by Ivan Cosovic of Breakout. Ivan, thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Mike. Happy New Year, and thanks for having me.
Happy New Year. And I'm glad that you're here because it's been a pretty crazy 2022. And so, I know it's been a month or two since we last got together for sort of our short selling wrap up. So it'd be great if we could do a full year in review.
Sure,
Can you give us an idea of, the activity level and just sort of the general themes that you saw in 2022?
sure, of course. So we recorded what we call major short campaigns or short reports of 113, which is actually a bit lower than in 2021, where we had about 20 more, so 135. But it has been a very successful year. So on average, the companies for short sellers, the companies in a focus went down on average 31%, and this compares to about 19% decline of S&P 500 index. They did underperform, I have to say. The another reference which we often use together with you, which is RKK, which lost about two-thirds in 2021, and that might be also the reason for a bit lower number of campaigns last year than 2 years ago, which is that from our experience and from what we are so hearing from short sellers, activist short sellers, so meaning those publicizing their short ideas, often they don't really rush to publish on a company that is already down maybe two-thirds or a very, very significant percentage, and maybe keep the research for themselves because they are seeing it's anyhow dropping. So might be part of the reason for that. But yes, very busy and very successful year. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the technical aspect is certainly part of it, right? I mean, they're trying to risk manage their positions if they're actually trading on these ideas. So, as you said, they may just be looking for a bit of a rally if they can get one in some of these names to maybe then release to set up a better entry point. But as far as, the activity, I know you mentioned that it was down a bit, but can you give us an idea of who was the most prolific in terms of the number of reports that they put out for 2022?
So it's yet another year, I guess, where we have seen Hindenburg being very active, and also Spruce Point being very active. And this is not really a surprise to see. So both of them had 10 public short calls, and then also another which is very active, usually White Diamond Research, focusing on typically at sub-billion market cap. They had seven short calls. So it's business as usual in that sense. We did have a few newcomers that were also very active. So Ningi Research with five short calls, and Peabody Street Research bought Anonymous with four short calls, and both had a very successful initial year of activity. So the Peabody Street Research short calls or companies in focus went on average 50%, and those of Ningi went on average 39%, so outperforming the average short call performance.
Are those at the top end of the performers, or who is actually the best performer, outside of the number of ideas, but more so on the performance side of things? Who had some of the top ideas of the year?
Yeah, I mean, it's always interesting to track that. And when we talk about the percentage drop, obviously we are disregarding the market cap. So there are those specializing maybe in bigger companies, and these companies are somewhat less in jeopardy of dropping more than 90%. And there are those focusing on the smaller cap. So there is, also that to it, but disregarding market cap and just looking at the average drop, we do have activists that we just mentioned, Peabody Street Research at the very top. So in terms of the average performance, and after them we have some, again, usual names, Hindenburg, White Diamond, Kerrisdale, Culper Research was very successful. Fuzzy, Panda, with their EV focus, had several great calls. The ELMS, the company they focused on EV company, Electric Last Mile, went bankrupt, for example, while Hindenburg's another EV target, Mullen Automotive, is also down more than 90%. So we did see in 2022 maybe the next chapter in this EV focus of activists and a lot of success there. So there are no new short calls on Tesla, maybe. So explicitly, but Tesla is another EV that we are seeing having not so great performance as of late.
So aside from those two EV focused stocks that you mentioned were down 90 plus percent, or 99% in the case of bankruptcy, what were some of the other top performing ideas from short sellers in 2022?
Yeah, so I mentioned, I believe, Culper Research having a very good year, and the best call from there was actually on the one company called Core Scientific, which collapsed and is now in Chapter 11 proceeds. So actually, they focused on this hosting and Bitcoin mining company. They focused on it, and originally it was actually $2.4 billion dollar company when they focused on it, and they focused it on it due to the allegations of dubious transactions and overvaluations. And indeed, this mining and Bitcoin or crypto focus did appear in several other instances last year. So basically, that one was very good, and more than 33 of targets declined more than 50%. So a lot of success. We could talk about all the ones that dropped. Talking about crypto, for example, another one that dropped a lot is the Norton Data over here in Europe, in Germany, and so on. So basically, yes, maybe crypto next to EV was another topic that we have seen very prominently in 2022.
So I do want to get to the themes, but before we get to the themes from 2022, I would just like to get your thoughts on the geographic breakdown of the short calls this year. Was it still predominantly in the US? What were we seeing in Europe and China as well?
US have been the most represented market. So and it's approximately always around that number, but more than two-thirds of companies were actually US headquartered companies, and then behind that we had 12 companies in across Europe. So UK plus Sweden. Sweden was here in Europe in focus quite a bit last year. And then there is Canada. And then we come to the surprise that China actually had only, or China headquarter companies had only 8 short calls. And actually, on average, there was not so much of success for activists, save for maybe Grizzly with Neo and a few others. So it hasn't been, China Hustle 2.0 continuation last year. Beyond that, Canada was very successful, Europe was very successful, and the US has also been quite successful for authors of critical calls. And we have seen everything from the smallest companies to the biggest, such as Hindenburg making a public short call on Twitter in middle of this heat with Elon takeover, and then also afterwards going very timely long, and so on. He was not the only one among the short sellers and those publicly talking about their ideas to do that, something like that with Twitter. So we have seen really from very small companies to quite big companies, And on that other range, part of the range, it's Muddy Waters with their calls, quite a lot of success for them as well. And Spruce Point with large cap and typical accounting focus, which they have. So, yes, very broad indeed.
And why do you think that is that we've seen such a drop off in China? I mean, certainly there's been a lot of headlines in the past year about the potential for delistings. But do you have any thoughts as to why we might have seen a drop off in activity? I mean, is it just that there's less frauds, or does it feel like the short sellers just kind of avoiding it because of the uncertainty around the geopolitics?
I believe part of the reason is that they did a lot in the past years. So, with focusing on a number of companies there, and we have seen some on newly listed companies. We have seen last year some very quick developments, like this infamous IPO of the AMTD. I believe ticker is HKD, which skyrocketed, I don't know how many thousands percent at IPO. And then it was also briefly flagged by Hindenburg, I believe, and so on. And it dropped off. So maybe the dynamics also didn't necessarily allow the activists to come out with full-fledged, reports, whereas many other companies, such as I don't know the got you. So the this educational company out of China have been already in focus in the past. So it has been continuation of those maybe previous ideas. And we do see this, the publishers of these critical calls moving from one topic or one geography and focusing more on another. We have seen a lot of cannabis, for example, several years ago, but less so now because that has been, under a lot of scrutiny. But now it's EV maybe and so on. So
So yeah, let's turn back to those themes because you did just bring up EV again. So I know you mentioned EV seemed to be one of the big themes in 2022. Um, what other areas seem to be popping up more and more? Is it just EV and crypto, or what were you seeing?
So, in terms of merging topic, and next to these two, what we have seen and heard, based on number of public communications by short sellers, maybe most notably Jim Chanos as well, and also by work of Muddy Waters, we are seeing emergence or much more focus on ESG companies now, and we wouldn't be too surprised if this continues and even grows in 2023. So basically, this team has been kind of getting there in 2022, and we might see more of that in 2023. Most notably, it was Muddy Waters and Jim Chanos focusing on Sunrun last year, and also the Muddy Waters on Hazi. That would be this. You might help me. It was on your chopping block. The full name of the company is
Hannon
uh,
Armstrong.
Canon Armstrong. Correct.
Yep.
That is, I believe, also partly ESG topic. So yes, that's what we have seen in terms of geography. Again, few surprises. With less of China, and over in Europe, I did mention that more of Sweden, and part of that is maybe also that the activists did achieve success with a few initial reports, which maybe motivated others to look more closely at a number of other companies, and have also managed to achieve further success. So yeah.
So let's turn to 2023. Now that we are here in January, what are some of the other themes? Are you seeing any sort of activity, whether it's from, as you mentioned, Chanos? Are there any sort of emerging ideas that we can be on the lookout for in the new year?
Yes, so what we are seeing at the start of the year is a lot of focus on, and pardon my language, on so-called shitcoins, so which have been bouncing at the start of this year, and what we might see then, should this trend continue, and should the companies from this broad umbrella, pop further, we might see a number of reports actually, that were maybe not so interesting for short sellers when companies were 90% down, but now if they are popping up and the valuations become again very much unreasonable in eyes of short sellers, you might see more reports on that area. And as mentioned, indeed, the ESG. So let's see what happens in that segment. We believe there will be also those, specialists on certain areas that will continue to publish on that. Whether is it, Viceroy looking mainly at Europe, or Iceberg also looking to a large extent to Europe. We believe they will continue with such focus as has been the case for them, and some others might move more into ESG. Now, I mentioned EV a number of times, and I believe this circle of focus on EV companies is might be coming, to 360 degrees. So they turned many stones there and looked at many tickers and achieved a lot of success. So
And what about crypto? I mean, we recently heard of obviously the big downfall of FTX and Sam Bankman Fried and his whole sort of network that was going on. We've seen a lot of the fallout spread to other crypto, whether it's exchanges or businesses. I know I've seen a bit of rumbling out there about, I think it's Silvergate, which is a bank that was, tied into all of this as well. So, I mean, do you expect there to be a lot more activity in the crypto space and more fallout as we see these sort of rolling failures?
on the public segment of that, yes, as you know, Mike, many of these companies are not public companies, and then it's many cases it's about tokens, and not necessarily all parts of short selling communities are looking into the tokens. But indeed, there has been a lot of noise coming from the short selling side when it comes to Silvergate in recent months. We did see also, again, coming back to Jim Chanos, targeting, he targeted Coinbase last year, and Coinbase did plunge, obviously, for a number of reasons, not only because of that thesis, which is often the case. The stocks move from a number of reasons and so on. And again, coming back to this, what I just mentioned, we are seeing also on this kind of renewed interest, especially from retail investors, in these many beaten down names. Let's see, that will potentially also attract then the short sellers to put out some reports. But indeed, crypto is another one where we could see much more, especially in what's public of that. So
Yeah, it's interesting that you mention in terms of the tokens because I thought that was one of the more fascinating developments with what's been going on with a lot of these bankruptcies. And I can't remember the name of the exchange or the brokerage firm, but it was ruled by, I believe, one of the courts that the crypto actually ended up being in the possession of the firm, in terms of bankruptcy proceedings, and it was not the property of the holders, of the individual investors.
correct.
And so I thought that was, sort of one of those shocking moments where in crypto it's, this belief that it's all yours and it's sort of this decentralization, but in reality it was just ruled by the courts that none of these assets were actually theirs. So, that could be something that, as a lot of these unfold, it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. In that same line of thinking, I did want to ask you in terms of outside of activity and short selling specific with stocks and markets, is what should we be on the lookout for in terms of news flow or regulatory developments?
So we have seen a couple of interesting things recently. One came out of Canada. They initiated a public discussion on a disclosure scheme, which would be similar to the one which we have over here in European Union. So basically, this short disclosure scheme uh, requires many managers, irrespective of where they are situated in the world, to disclose their short positions when they cross 0.5% of short interest. And this happens actually very timely. It happens on the next workday or in 2 workdays, and there are always, very very interesting insights to be observed in terms of data analysis that come out of this. And interestingly, now Canada, which is also the one which I believe, let me just very quickly check, but I believe the Canada in terms of the public short calls, yes, indeed, it was the worst performer past year. He's now considering to bring more transparency in this segment. So, not surprisingly, perhaps. Other thing is this, the ongoing and recently very quiet, I guess, Department of Justice investigation into the this short selling space of public short calls and so on. And that has been rather quiet. I don't know, Mike, if you caught any recent news. Honestly, we haven't too much.
No, I haven't seen any developments in terms of progress of the case. I mean, I know that you did mention in your report sort of the developments with Muddy Water specifically. So, I'll let you elaborate on that. But in terms of developments outside of sort of the Muddy Waters headlines, I haven't really seen anything that, the case was progressing or there was pending action. So it has been very quiet.
Mm. Yeah, so there was an interesting article recently in Institutional Investor, I believe. They wrote about the Muddy Waters suing the both DOJ and the SEC, and actually asking for communications which they had with specific individuals or entities in relation to this ongoing investigation. So, it works both ways. I would say, and the short selling community, or in this case, Muddy Waters, is showing that so that they want to know, I guess, much more in terms of, what happened behind the public scene. And so let's see if, they are successful and they get access to this interesting information. And yeah, that's been another piece of news, I guess, as of recently.
All right, and just to wrap up sort of this year in review, what is going on with Elon Musk? Is he going to step down as Twitter CEO? What is going on? I mean, certainly there's been a lot of focus on the plunge in share prices for Tesla, and that's certainly a hot topic given its large following. But any thoughts on sort of the empire of Elon Musk? Because I did see that I think it was Chamath did sort of give his own prediction that Elon may bring Starlink public here in 2023 as a means to free up some capital. So, any thoughts on Elon before we end this?
Yeah, so a few years ago, Elon tweeted, and before he went public about Twitter takeover, he tweeted something along the lines that who owns the memes owns the universe, So and he is now indeed owning the memes, but not necessarily in the way he wished for, because what we have seen, especially from retail investor segment, Wall Street bets, and as well as on Twitter, are many memes in which Elon Musk and his recent Tesla performance and the Twitter developments are in negative focus. Yes, so he became the meme king, but not in the way necessarily he wished at that time. Yeah, that's interesting thought from Chamat, and will be interesting to see how short sellers might react to any new public companies that Elon Musk brings to U.S. exchanges. Another interesting development or potential development, which we are, looking at, or uh, not anticipating, but wishing to see if something happens is if Elon Musk goes after via Twitter, goes after some short sellers via banning account or whatever. This, as far as I know, didn't happen yet, but is definitely something which would contradict his infamous, freedom of speech, and then blocking a number of journalists for a period of time in December, I believe. And it will be interesting to see, if he goes after short sellers, especially those that might go very much vocal on him as well. And interesting fact, we saw that a few days ago, is that he broke the Guinness book record on the person who lost the most money. So that's another record for Elon.
Another one that he probably doesn't want to own.
No, I'm sure no.
All right, Ivan, it's been great catching up. I know it's been a couple of months, but as always, I love sitting down with you and chatting about all the developments in the short selling world. So thank you for coming on, and I look forward to doing more of these catch ups in 2023.
Same here. Thanks a lot for having me, and all the best in the upcoming year.